last week, you or the three of us came across a report on 9 to 5 Google, which was talking about how Chrome OS sales had surpassed Mac OS in 2020. That then prompted you, Ben, to do a quick blog post on the workhub.co.uk, and we can tell everyone about that later on. But it really got us talking about what does the future of an operating system look like? What's going on in the workspace? What do we even mean by an operating system these days, right? Is it something that someone needs to use with Windows, or is it something that actually just needs to communicate with hardware? And we thought we would jump on a quick Zoom call, hit record, and see where the conversation took us. Ben, do you care to kick things off?
Yeah, no worries. So yeah, as you said, that news article last week, it was pretty interesting because I knew that Mac OS, Windows, those are the two big operating systems whenever it comes to desktops. What I didn't expect was for Chrome OS to be sort of snapping at the heels of Mac OS. And then all of a sudden last year, we saw Chromebooks start to take over and take that sort of second place crown away from Mac OS. So now the two biggest desktop operating systems are one, Windows 10, and then two, Chrome OS. And these are two completely different types of operating systems. So I sort of thought, well, okay, surely this means that we're now at a pivot point. So we've got this one classic monolithic operating system that sort of does everything, whether you want it to or not. And then we've got a small, lightweight operating system. And the more we look at these small and lightweight OSs, the more we see they're starting to take market share away from these two big classic operating systems. And I think there's a whole lot of history there around that, a whole load of history around why we've got something like Windows and Mac OS, and then this new trend, as you called out, future operating systems, this new trend towards small, lightweight OSs.
You know, to give you an idea, in Q1, Chrome OS took 5.3% of the market, Mac OS 5.8%. But by the end of the year in Q4, Chrome OS was 14.4% and Mac OS was only 7.7%. So what is it that we think that has caused that in this particular example?
Grannies, mums, people who shouldn't have computers. We've all got them. Mm-hmm. I can't tell you how many of my family have Chromebooks.
Really?
Because like my mum would say, oh, I need a MacBook. I'm like, ultimately, my mum's very tight with money, so the easiest way to scare her off is to tell her how much something is. Yeah, no, I don't want to buy that, unless you want to buy it for me, which I don't. And then I tell her about a Chromebook, and back then they were £179 from Curry's. All she did was went on Facebook, played games, most things. And it's interesting. Maybe we should go back to this in a moment. The kind of the message of an operating system and a workspace and how they differ from user to user. Maybe we can talk about that in a bit. But I think that's where people, all the kids having to now work from home, they're needing devices which are either being, purchased by the parents, or they've already purchased, or they're like, I've given Reese my old Acer Chromebook, which was just kind of holding up the desk. Mia's got a Chromebook. My daughter's she's actually got a MacBook because she's like me and needs to have her ego satisfied by having a very slick and sexy machine. And I think that's, obviously price comes into it, but I think that what you're seeing is those people that just aren't very computer au fait, giving them something where if they go wrong, you just delete the Google account and you start again. It's a very low touch endpoint. Now, I don't know what those numbers look like in regards to if they've got it based on who they are, and they probably can't because of, for various reasons. But that would be my take, that kind of in a consumer world, that's where you're really kind of seeing those numbers jump up, right? Because that's, right. I'm sure we've all got stories where in the days of old, oh, my Windows 95 PC is not working. Well, stop looking at content you shouldn't, and then it won't install software on your device that makes your PC run slow and steals all your bank details and all that kind of stuff. I'm sure we've got various. I used to actually have one of my friends, coincidentally, it would break every Thursday when they made a roast dinner. So I would go around every Thursday to fix something on my computer and get fed. This has been This is in my 18 to 20 region when I didn't really eat but drank a lot.
Yeah, brilliant, brilliant. So I heard simplicity there, but I think what I also heard was you then started to talk about asking the question of, well, what is it that people want to do on it, right? What is it they're accessing? And I think that then starts to take the conversation to what does the workspace look like and where is it being delivered from?
So yeah, and I think that's completely right. Exactly what you said, Sam. Exactly what you said, Craig. It's what do people actually need to do? What do they need to get access to? Right? And I think this is why you go back to 2007. I think this is why iPhone took off so much, because it was easy, because it was simple. You go in, click on the application you want, you self-service installed, off you go. It's simple, and people only get access to the applications they want to get access to. I mean, that's the whole idea around the digital workspace. What do they actually want to do? What do they actually need to do? Why overcomplicate it? Why give them access to a whole load of different options and choices? Because even though we try to give people choice, IT tries to give people choice, a lot of the time people want a clear direction about what to do and how to access their applications. All they want is information. They need applications to broker the information, and they need a device to give them access to the applications. It's as simple as that. If you overcomplicate it, they're going to get lost. Exactly. And that's why I think Chrome, like you said, Craig, when you know, we're talking about MacBooks, how much is a MacBook? Well, that's very expensive is the answer, but more realistically, how complex is a MacBook for someone to use? I mean, it's a simple operating system compared to probably Windows, but then you compare it to a really lightweight operating system, then do they need all of that stuff? Do they need the really powerful processor, all the RAM in that device to go on Facebook? No, no, they don't. They need very little to be productive and to do what they need to do.
Yeah, cost obviously comes into it. I mean, you know, there is no doubt about it. You tend to find Chromebooks pop up quite a lot, particularly in education. So I assume that the cost of the actual device comes into this as well. And then last year, I would argue that probably hardware shortages, supply chain shortages were also a big challenge.
In all of our eyes, I think, you know, the device is just a conduit to get to what you need, right? I've got an LG TV here. It's got Netflix on it. My daughter's got a Samsung TV. You know what? It's got Netflix on it.
Yeah.
They both play Netflix.
Yeah.
So it's really, you know, using what you need to do what you have to do in your job, right? Not just randomly giving people. I mean, it's nice to get MacBooks and it's nice to get these Surface Pros because it's a nice, you know, it's nothing nicer than. Actually, I remember working very closely with a well-known bank in London, and they had the Intel Nooks. I don't know if you remember these. These were very they had the ones you could actually put the phone on and it would charge them.
Nice. Yeah.
Didn't work out very well because the vibration caused the phone to fly off. But when you opened the box, do you remember the Intel where it goes bom 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 bom?
Yeah.
Every time you opened this cardboard box, it played the Intel theme tune.
No.
Yeah. I swear it's a true story, that.
Wow. I love that.
But that was kind of cool because you kind of, and it's like when you open a MacBook and it's like, I remember sending my old MacBook back to Citrix and I still had the box. I had the sleeve, you know, the plastic. I put it back in there like it was brand new. Like, I get the opening that is a very, very nice experience. But, you know, as Ben said, as and when, I mean, the iPhone is fantastic. I like when I got my phone from IGEL and had my old from Citrix, it did this thing that I'd never seen before where you scan this crazy little thing on your phone and I don't know if you've done it yet. And it just moves everything. I'm like, that is what you call a slick user experience. That is fantastic. It's a bit slow because of, you know, all the videos and whatever, but it was amazing. I didn't lose a single thing. But I think that's kind of what people like from that. But as you start to try and do your job, you start to realize that you still can't do your job because you've still got the problems that you had when, you know, whatever it was before.
Yeah. So in the consumer world, you know, there's an argument that says, if I'm sat at home and I need access to Facebook, I want to browse the web, play some stuff on Spotify, then I've actually got a whole host of choices in front of me. I could go and get myself a nice Surface device. It's going to come with Windows 10. It's going to keep itself updated. Might have to do the odd update every other couple of weeks. But it works, and and obviously I can install as many applications as I want on it. Alternatively, I can go out and buy myself a nice shiny new MacBook, which by the way, I don't think anyone wants to buy a shiny new MacBook right now because of the M1 processor that's come out. Everybody's holding off. And actually, the reports are saying that all of the older MacBooks that have held their price for many, many years are actually starting to come down in price now because everyone's so keen and just wants, you know, when's the next version of the M chip coming out? When's the 16-inch version coming out, etc. Or you've then got, you know, something like a Chromebook, which is, do you know what, for a couple of £100, I can go and have something that I know is probably not going to get any malware on it. It's going to be easy to use. The battery life is going to be good. And to your point, my kid or my grandma could use it. But in the business space, how do we see that? Is there a difference between the two? Ben, you were talking about, you know, Windows of old versus what is now required by organizations moving forward.
So I think when we're looking at these trends, I think the big question we've got to ask is why now? I mean, obviously we've got the pandemic last year, which caused the hardware shortage, as you said. But Chrome OS has been around for a while. Why now? Why is it because of last year? Is it the cost? Is it the price differential between that and Mac, which caused it to be different? I think that's part of the reason. I think there's something else going on here too. I mean, when we think about Windows, we always think about full-fat Windows, as from 95 all the way back. Well, Windows 1 back in 1985, all the way through to Windows 95, all the way through to Windows 2000. Windows Vista, we don't really talk about that. Windows ME, definitely don't talk about that. Yep. All the way up to the modern times. But the thing is, Microsoft, fair play to them, have also, Windows ME, Microsoft have actually in the past tried to bring out a lightweight operating system. And it's something that we tend to forget about quite a lot. So when they originally brought this out, and this was Windows RT, it failed. And I think they withdrew it from the market within about 2 years. It was a good operating system. And I think, as I said before, it was probably the right operating system at the wrong time because Windows RT didn't support Win32 applications. Those are the big fat applications that most organizations use these days. And the problem is when they bought that out, that must have been 2014, 2015, I don't think the SaaS environment, the cloud-based application environment, was where it needs to be. It was too immature at the time for people to move wholesale to a digital workspace type experience using all of their SaaS applications, consuming them all through a digital workspace. So I think when we look at what happened last year, it's because we're now at that pivot point, and we're probably past that, where SaaS applications can take over a lot of those fat application functions. What I used to do quite a lot, talking to customers, I'd ask them this question. I'd show all 5 ecosystems. So the Apple ecosystems, Mac OS, iOS, Android, SaaS applications, and Windows. And I say to them, look, over the next 5 to 10 years, which of these ecosystems is going to be more important to your business? And they'd always say SaaS. SaaS applications over the next 5 to 10 years are going to be the most important platform that we're going to use. Yeah. And then I'd ask them the opposite question, which was, which is the least, which out of all these 5 ecosystems is going to become less important to you? And they'd always say Windows. Win32 applications are going to become less important to us. So there's a clear direction towards SaaS, and that's really picked up over the past few years. And that's why I think that's the why now answer. Why has a small lightweight operating system started to make inroads into Microsoft and into Mac OS? And that's why I think another part of that, another piece around that, is the fact that Microsoft themselves are bringing out a new lightweight operating system, hopefully to take over from where the failure of Windows RT was.
Yeah. So here's a question for you both. You know, when someone says to me, what is an operating system? I typically think of 2 things. First of all, I think of something that is obviously able to communicate with the components of the hardware. And then the other half of it is the piece that I'm actually looking at, what I'm actually interacting with, which some people may well call, you know, the first part of your workspace, right? The fact that you've got a window manager up and running, and the fact that I can see graphics on the screen, et cetera, and control the mouse and keyboard. Yeah. What's interesting for me is that I don't think I've ever heard of Microsoft Windows Virtual Desktop being referred to as an operating system in the cloud. Even VDI doesn't use the word operating system typically. Desktop as a service doesn't either. I find that quite interesting that no one actually says, oh, you're just going to put your OS in the cloud. It's like, no, you're actually delivering a service or a workspace from the cloud. The part that's actually controlling all the hardware underneath, that's completely irrelevant.
I've got a. Sorry, Craig. I'll let you go after. So my view of an operating system, right, is just to simplify it, is it realistically for the end user, it's got one job, and that's to broker access to applications. That's it. And that's where the whole workspace piece comes in. That's all. Users don't really care about the operating system. They don't care about the hardware a lot of the time. Don't care what the operating system is doing to control that hardware. All they see it as, and all it should be, is a broker for applications. That's my view anyway. Go ahead, Craig.
No, I agree. I think I coined this phrase. Everybody used to talk about user experience, and I actually changed it in Citrix when I used to do our solution days to expectations, because I remember my daughter picking up an iPad, never seen one before, 6 years old, and just intuitively started swiping across the screen, and you're like, how did you know that? And as a human, it's a human behavior. We just kind of instinctively felt right. And you remove the home button from an iPhone. Who misses that home button? I know I don't. It's become one of the most, once you figured it out, it was designed for how we expected it to behave. And to what Ben's saying there is, this is what I expect. This thing comes on, I don't know what it is, and I need to do A, B, and C. Stuff happens, I get single sign-on, all that kind of stuff. Like, it's interesting, when you were talking about, is it different in the personal world and the business world? Mm-hmm. Ultimately, I don't think it is. Like, you can argue the technical differences, but do you have single sign-on at home? Many people think they do because they're caching passwords. We know that's not single sign-on, but as an example, right? I remember doing I think I mentioned it to you before. They interviewed a well-known Mexican company, and I interviewed several senior people, and they said, yes, we have a single sign-on solution, and that solved my problem. I go, oh, great, what do you use? One said it was FastPass. It's the one that caches the passwords in an app. Right. Then there was one, somebody said they use Notepad. Somebody uses Chrome or whatever it is. And right. And I want that exact same experience when I go to do my work stuff, which obviously you do get true single sign-on with technologies like, Azure, AAD, and Okta, and Citrix, and VMware, and whoever else does that kind of stuff. So I think there are similarities in what you expect. Obviously, they are very technically different in what's happening from a personal perspective and a business perspective, but ultimately they are the very same expectations where, obviously IT comes in and hinders some of those expectations because you can't cache passwords and it has to be done in a proper way. But from a perspective of a user, that's what I expect. Click on something, does what it's supposed to do, and I get the experience I expect.
So realistically then, Craig, well, what you're saying, is, I want to put words in your mouth here, is that the operating system should be invisible to the end user, realistically.
Yeah,
what they want to do is get stuff done. They want to get into whatever their productivity service is, the application, the SaaS app, the Windows app, whatever it is, and the operating system should just be in the background, just providing that access.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's, yeah.
I think the reason why I think there is still a difference, and I see where you're coming from there, Craig, which is, if you can make things in work as simple and as secure and as easy to use than perhaps my iPad gives me now when I'm logging on to my bank, for instance, right? Mm-hmm. If you can make it as simple as that for work, then I think they are the same. And I think that's ultimately the aim is, right, how can we ensure that the workspace that we use day in, day out for work has gone through that level of consumerization that we've all come to know and love at home. I think the challenge is that particularly in some organizations and in some verticals, I think there is an additional level of complexity that comes into it. And that may well be, the peripherals or the devices that need to be plugged into that workspace, whether it be scanners, tap and go type of cards, healthcare devices, whatever it might be. There's also a level of security, compliance, visibility that perhaps you don't always require on an endpoint that you're using for home use, for instance. And I think that's where I sometimes do see the difference, which is, if I look at what a Chrome OS can deliver compared to a Windows device for a 50,000 seat organization, the reason that they have historically and probably will continue to go with Windows, or at least want to go with Windows over, say, a Chrome OS, is that level of additional control, security, compliance, complexity that they have to include in the solution.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think if you look at Apple Pay, right? It blew my mind that when I used to go to America, I could not use Apple Pay. I could not use contactless. I think they only just started doing chip and PIN maybe a couple of years ago, and you're like, but Apple
signing,
Apple, California, American-based company, you invented this, yet you're not using it. And going back to what you're saying there, Simon, there are reasons they can't. You know, it's not trusted or whatever that is. So I completely agree with you from that perspective. Yeah. I think also, like saying on that kind of payment, I don't know if every of you bank with Lloyds, I do. I will never. They are.
What's your account number?
It's 1, 2. There's no money in there. She spends it all. But there's a very interesting thing on there. I don't know if you bank with Lloyds, but they have this ability now to. They call it. I'm gonna have to look it up, the name of it. But basically, it's a banking workspace, meaning I can add bank accounts from different banks and view that under Lloyds.
Yeah.
And, well, that sounds familiar, doesn't it? That's my workspace, but from a financial perspective. And now I've got that as a consumer. I mean, even like my pension now from IGEL shows up on my Lloyds bank account. I can see, and it's like it's a single pane. I know everybody hates this phrase, but it is like from that perspective, I'm getting that single pane of glass view when it comes to my internet banking, which is, you know, I saw that and I was like, I want to go and get a bank account with another bank just so I can kind of see how that works.
Yeah. Why have one bank account balance that says 000 when you can have 4 that say 000?
Do you think that the big difference between consumer and personal computing and computing in business and in enterprise is to do with ecosystems? When I'm doing stuff like you said, Craig, when I'm doing banking, when I'm doing social media or anything like that, my ecosystem's really small. It's me, it's my laptop, and it's a service that I'm using. But when I'm doing something for business, when I'm doing something for work or enterprise, then there's a whole load of different ecosystems that we need to be integrating with. Like you called out, Simon, there's the security piece, there's the sign-on piece, there's the different types of applications that I need to get access to. Potentially there's virtual Windows applications and desktops. Potentially there's the management of the device itself. There's so many different ecosystems that you need something that will bring all of that together. And that's something you just don't get in the consumer space. You don't have to integrate with all these different ecosystems. So I think that's probably where the key difference is.
I think one of the things that IGEL has done very well at over the last couple of years is to continue to build on the ecosystem and the integrated technologies we've got with the IGEL Ready program, etc. I mean, having those 100+ integrations not only means that someone can obviously deploy IGEL with confidence, but get a like-for-like, if not better experience that they're used to out of deploying IGEL in the same way they would deploy Windows, right? I mean, we've all seen it. Windows gets deployed, it's nice and fast. Then you go and stick agent number 1 on it to do patch management. Then there's a second agent, a third agent, a fourth agent. Before you know it, there's 20 agents. You know, your desktops cost you an arm and a leg, and also the performance is absolutely diabolical. In my home life, and it happens in gaming and it happens on my mobile, on my iPad, etc. If the organization that is providing me the service updates their back end, the chances are they're going to then send me an update down on my phone. Every day I open up my phone, I've got another 4 applications that need to be updated. Every other week I turn on the PlayStation, it wants another update. If I want to try and play Fortnite, it needs another update, etc., etc. I think in the days of old, at the very least, you know, for the last 15, 20 years, IT inside an organization has been significantly more stable and slower paced than where we are today with the cloud, right? I mean, I think as more and more organizations move their workspace, their data, their applications to the cloud, one of the challenges they're facing on the endpoint is, well, I've got to try and update that. And typically it's not down to the user to self-serve and to self-update. It's not automatic. So we're in this horrible world of, you know, oh, I've got SCCM or some sort of PT lifecycle management tool, and I use that to update my Windows builds. I use that to update the applications. And the truth is, some of those old school methods just don't work, and they definitely don't bloody work when you try and do it over a VPN for 1,000+ users because we're all working at home.
Yeah, and you touched on a few points there, Simon, and I remember, when I moved into product management at Citrix, we had just moved to the LTSR and CR model, which obviously you're probably familiar with Microsoft as well, right?
Yeah.
So we did LTSR, which was it's kind of like your set and forget, right? You got like patches for it and whatever, and people who had that mindset would use that. And then I think we can talk about this one freely. Red Bull Racing, every 3 months, Neil from Red Bull would be on the latest and greatest on the CRs, but because of what they did some crazy stuff. But you do have that balance. So I think that you do have those kind of customers, and it's the same. I remember when we changed the receiver icon from black to blue. You would not believe the user education that we had to think about, because of the user types that we were dealing with. Any small change was like, well, that icon that was black is now blue. What does that mean? Well, nothing. It's still the same. It's just a new logo, right? It still does the very same thing. But a user perception thing was, but what do I do? Well, you launch it and you've got the very same app with the same icons on it, and you do what you always did. But how you and I and Ben think about that versus, I don't want to kind of go into those kind of millennials versus generations, because we're all, well, except Ben's not yet 40, but we're all above that 40.
I'm a millennial, Craig.
Yeah, but we're not. My point about this, I don't like that stereotyping, because I believe that anybody of any age can have the right mindset, right? So I don't like to pigeonhole myself into that. Just because I'm older doesn't mean I can't have that younger mentality when it comes around to technology.
Ben, your blog, theworkhub.co.uk, you put a lot on there around VMware, workspace management, VDI, etc. Specifically on this post, what does the OS of the future look like? Talk us through a little bit about what you're talking about in that blog.
Yeah, well, it is. It's all about the workspace and the operating system of the future. Because, again, if you think about Windows 95, if you think about Windows from a historical perspective, and you can talk about Windows historically now, it's 35, 36 years old, which is still young, by the way. You think about the early versions. It wasn't until Windows 3.11 that networking was really introduced into Windows. And so Windows as an operating system was never designed to be centrally managed. It was designed to have everything that user is ever going to use installed at the point of provisioning. Everything was installed. All the applications are installed. You send it out to the end user. They then use that. If it needed an update, then someone went out with a few floppy disks, remember those, stuck them in and installed the application. That was the way it worked. I mean, there wasn't even a central management tool until SMS was released in 1994. So Windows has been around for, almost a decade before there was any way of centrally managing it. And so still you had this model of everything being installed locally, this whole, as you called out, Simon, this whole local workspace. And we've seen that iterated and evolved until we get to Windows 10. And I think Windows 10 is still, has still been designed where everything is installed locally. Everything a user could use is installed locally. I mean, I was reading an article last week about the fact that the 3D objects folder is going to be removed in Windows 10 H2 release. And the reason they're removing it is because no one ever used it. I think most people didn't even know what the hell it was for. So that's going. But I think that's a symptom. That's an example of that monolithic type operating system. The future OS doesn't need to be tied into any of that ancient, I should give Windows a break, any of that older paradigm of doing stuff, because a new operating system should be like an F1 car. You should cut away anything that you don't need. You should keep it lightweight. You should keep it agile. You should get rid of all the excess weight. And I think the example I use in the blog is on an F1 car, you don't have air conditioning. You don't have a media player. You don't have a CD player because you don't need it. That's not what it's made for. It's made for being reliable and safe and secure and speedy and have a really good ability to handle. And if you compare that to what Windows is and still is, Windows is a truck with everything on it. So I think the operating system of the future is going to be lightweight. It's going to be agile. It's going to be there to broker your access to your workspace, whatever that looks like. SaaS applications, virtual Windows applications, native applications. It's going to be there to broker that for you. So that's my view on what the future operating system looks like. And I think there are a couple of very, very good examples of that. And obviously I'm a little bit biased. But I'd say that's IGEL OS, and that's the likes of Chrome OS.
I was expecting you to say somebody else actually, but when you said bias, but
I didn't mention VMware. Did you notice?
yeah, that's what I was expecting. Did you work for VMware?
Did I? Oh yes, yes I did, Craig. Where's my hat? Anyway, go on.
Again, with a bit of bias on, if you take a look at, the triple-digit growth that IGEL's been through over the last couple of years, it's very clear that what people are looking for now is an operating system on the endpoint that is just simple to use, coming back to Craig's first point, easy to manage, secure, cost-effective, and allows them to consume a workspace that arguably is typically delivered from somewhere else.
And I think possibly in the same vein when it comes to when we're talking about virtual Windows applications, there was a conversation that Joe Bagley, I'm going to bring up VMware, but Craig, I'm doing it, that Joe Bagley, the EMEA CTO for VMware, was having a conversation with Brian Madden. And Joe, really unkindly, I think, said to Brian, you know what, Brian, VDI, why do we still need that? We don't need VDI anymore, do we? We've got containers, we've got containerized applications, we've got Kubernetes and all that cool stuff. Surely VDI is just a stopgap until we get everything into the cloud. And Brian Madden came back with, well, yeah, but you know what, Joe? If it's a stopgap, it's a 20-year stopgap, because Windows applications are still going to be around for a long time to come. It's this long tail of IT. Local applications are still going to be around for a long time too. And
so just to wrap up, what does the future look like? Because I've spoken to a fair few analysts over the last couple of weeks. I've spoken to you guys. I think there's a real difference moving forward between deploying, like we used to just go, oh, we're going to deploy VDI, to then, oh, we're going to deploy VDI from the cloud and we're going to call it desktop as a service. We're going to charge slightly different for it. There's something different now, which is the workspace. And I think in my mind, the new workspace that's being delivered for the cloud is more than just VDI desktop as a service.
Yes, I would. And I know this is an overused word, right? But I guess I think Ben and I have had this conversation. I think you actually said on the interview you two did at the beginning when Ben joined. I did actually watch it then, most of it. And I think you said this bit, like, what is a workspace? And it varies from person to person. So like my workspace might be a VDI desktop because that's what I need to do. I'm a graphics developer. I'm coding in Visual Studio, and that is my workspace, right? I use Windows. I've got all the pop-up notifications, and that's it. But my mobile experience is not. I don't want Windows on my iPhone, right? God forbid putting that on there, right? Because it's not. And so, I don't want to say that the workspace is the new operating system, or maybe I am, but I do believe that. We saw many customers in Citrix that go, I give people a VDI desktop because it gives me consistency from a user experience perspective. That's a bloody expensive way of doing something, right? If all you were trying to do is deliver a consistent user. And that's what we tried to do with Workspace and Citrix was, how do I give you a web view like, to your point, Simon, doesn't just do DAS or VDI or whatever you want to call it from any vendor, but how do I start to do, because as Ben said, SaaS is more and more relevant, right? People are using more and more SaaS apps. You're seeing everybody's moving to the cloud, everybody's having a service, as well as your personal services that you're using. So I think, from that perspective, does Workspace give you that consistent view across any device? So commonality and that user experience and how it looks and how it feels is very similar, irrespective of the device you're using. And maybe I am saying that Workspace is the new OS. I'm not saying it is or isn't, but it feels like maybe it is.
Mm. Ben?
I'd completely agree. This is unusual. I completely agree with what Craig just said there. That's exactly one of the things that. Yeah, sorry, Craig, disappointed you there. One of the things that I tried to do quite a lot over my time at VMware was trying to work out exactly what a digital workspace was. Okay, and there's different definition of a digital workspace for every person who uses it, because you could potentially say Microsoft, or you could say Teams. Potentially, Teams is someone's digital workspace because it integrates into pretty much every other Microsoft application out there. And to be fair, to be productive, Some users could potentially just use Teams and all the integrations to do the work they need to do. That's someone's workspace. But if you're using Adobe Illustrator, as Craig sort of called out, that's your workspace. And if you're a normal user using all sorts of different applications, that's what your workspace looks like. So there's so many different definitions out there. I think one of the key things, and I'll give Citrix some proper kudos here, one of the key things that Citrix called out and that I think really is the definition of the workspace is work is not a place. It's not somewhere you go, it's something you do. And that's what the workspace is. The workspace is whatever helps you to be as productive as possible. Whatever sort of mix of applications and ecosystems that is what the digital workspace is.
Yeah. Okay. I got one killer question to end on then. If the new digital workspace is coming from the cloud, then why do we need an operating system at the endpoint? Why not just have a web browser? Ben.
Because not everything is being delivered from the cloud right now, I would say. And also, as I called out, the most important thing for end users is information, okay? And I've called this out loads of different times across my career in EUC. That's what users are interested in, information. To get that information, they need an application to broker and format that information and present it to them. And underneath that, they need a device to broker access to the applications. Everything else, I used to really annoy a lot of people at VMware by saying this, but all the networking, all the storage, all the servers, all the tin, all that stuff is just plumbing. All that stuff is just plumbing to get information into the hands of people. So you need to have devices. You need to have devices to broker the access to applications. And to make all of that work together, the glue that sticks all of that together is the operating system. The end user doesn't need to see that, but it needs to be there to glue all these different pieces together to make sure that plumbing can get information into the hands of a human. So that's my view.
I agree, and just add to that I don't think web is capable on its own. I mean, if you look at, again, to use the Citrix one, if you were to use like the HTML5 or the Workspace app for Chrome, yeah, it does some of what you need, but not all, right? And so you can't give the user, going back to your point earlier on, Simon, if you don't give them the experience they expect, then kind of you're doomed for failure. So I think it's partly, if we can have a web operating system that was capable enough to do those kind of things and give you that true experience, to Ben's point of not all stuff is cloud-based, not all stuff is SaaS-based, and until it's capable of doing something like that, you're going to need something, an OS that's capable of, enabling those kind of things.
Yeah. Good points. Good. So Ben, quick plug. Where's your blog?
Theworkhub.co.uk. Just go along to it. I mean, I'll put it on LinkedIn anyway. So if anyone wants to go on, have a look, then go ahead. Let's get some of my stats up, shall we?
Perfect.
So that's theworkhub.co.uk. I need to have like a title that flashes on the screen or something, don't I?
You do.
Yeah, logo.
Not to be confused with similar sounding websites.
And Craig, what are you up to at the moment?
Oh, I'm doing some very interesting stuff. I'm writing some documents on different ways to get IGEL OS on your devices. I mean, you probably know this better than I do, Simon. I'm only 3 months in. But the first thing is, it's kind of like the chicken and egg situation. Like, okay, I love the story of IGEL OS, but how do I get IGEL OS on the device in the first place? So I did a short video earlier, actually worked on it Sunday. That's just showing how we can use SCCM as one mechanism. You're working with yourself on some other vendors that we can kind of show. Obviously, we just kind of want to show what technologies customers are using and show how IGEL. I have this thing I keep telling you about it. I have these 5 things. There's repurpose, which we all know, repurpose hardware, but can you repurpose your skills? So if you're using SCCM as a mechanism to deploy Windows, can you repurpose those people and those skills to deliver new technology such as IGEL OS? Okay, so you're reinvesting, which is another one of my buckets, reinvest in your skill sets and your people. And typically it can be money. So if you save money from using IGEL OS instead of going and buying loads of unnecessary hardware, then again, you're saving on investing on hardware and reinvesting again on people and skills. So I'm trying to break it down into those 5 buckets that I have. I think the other one, as part of this, the thing I do believe in, and goes back to what you said, IGEL OS enables the workspace of the future, which is not VDI or DAS or whatever, right? It is a combination of many, many things. And so future-proofing your workspace, the device can no longer be a thin device that has a gig of RAM and one CPU, and it needs to be a little bit beefier. It doesn't need to be a MacBook, but it needs to be more capable than a thin terminal, right? Because times are changing and stuff's being done locally, stuff's being done cloud-wise. Even Google Chrome as a browser is, as we all know, very CPU-intensive piece of things. So anyway, that's what I'm currently working on. Not as interesting as some of the stuff Ben's working on, but it's stuff that we need to put together.
Gentlemen, I'm conscious of time. Any last words from you, Ben?
Check out my blog, theworkhub.co.uk.
Craig, anything from you?
Check out Ben's blog, theworkhub.co.uk.